thanks. Let's bring in our top story panel to talk about this now. Republican political consultant Reverend Joe Watkins, a liberal Air America radio host Rachel Maddow, and Niger Innis, Republican strategist and spokesman for the Congress of Racial Equality. Glad to have you all back together again. All right, we heard what Dana just said, Rachel, that many of these people privately don't even want to talk about the ramifications of either the senator resigning or dying. But you've got to believe there are a lot of conversations going on right now that we're not privy to.
That's exactly right. I mean, on my radio show tonight on Air America, I said, this is what I know about the medical situation, this is what we know about the political implications, and I don't even want to talk about them. It does feel a little ghoulish to go into this, but the balance of the Senate could potentially be at hand here. I don't think we should take it as a given that Governor Rounds, if called upon to replace Senator Johnson, would definitely pick a Republican. That's the assumption, but is it?
But let's look at the history. It's not so much an assumption, because we know in the past when he had to replace a state senator who was a Democrat, he in fact replaced him with a Republican. Right. Would that be betraying the voters?
Well, you got to say
Senator Johnson's state?
I just got to say that Republicans, this is not the way that we want to control the Senate. I mean, I think every Republican senator, the president, the first lady, everybody in power, whether they're Democrats or Republican, they're all praying right now for Senator Johnson and for his family, hoping for a speedy recovery for him, and that's what I'm doing as well. This is not the way for the Senate to change hands. Clearly.
It's not the way for the Senate to change hands, everybody says, but clearly people are making calculations and they're having to do some jockeying for position now, just in the eventuality he doesn't recover.
I think those that would say that they're not making calculations are probably lying on the Democratic side and the Republican side. And I agree with Joe completely, and with Rachel, that our hearts go out and we're praying for his recovery, Senator Johnson's recovery. But the fact is, as this goes on and on, I don't know that he's going to have the leeway that Senator Biden had. He was out for several months, I think 8 months. So I don't know that he's going to have that leniency. As we know, South Dakota is a very red state, it's a very Republican state, and there could be a lot of pressure locally back at home if he's not coming into the Senate, if he's not voting consistently.
I can't believe that. Wait, hold on a second.
The rules say that you can't, that he can stay indefinitely. I mean, so that's what the Senate rules say. So from that standpoint, that can't change.
At some point in time, there will be some pressure.
There's even South Dakota history on this, in which a member of the Senate from South Dakota had a stroke, was gravely ill, didn't go back to work for more than 2 years. Saying that there's something special about South Dakota that means that he can't invoke the rule of holding onto his seat until he resigns, I think is a little ghoulish and weird. It's not going to happen. The last time the voters of South Dakota got to decide whether they wanted a Democratic or Republican senator for this seat was in 2002, when Senator Johnson was elected, when he last stood before the voters. The governor of that state is going to have to basically give the voters of South Dakota a one-finger salute and say, I don't care what you think, I'm going to do what I want for my party. I'm not sure that we should assume Governor Rounds would do that.
The pressure is not so much going to be on the governor. The pressure, and again, we're talking over several months, and of course, the priority here is for his recovery and Senator Johnson's full recovery. His family may decide that they don't want him to be on the sidelines. They'd prefer that he spend time at home and fully recover. But the pressure actually is going to be on the senators, I think, from home, because I think people are going to say, we want a vote in the United States, and we want to be represented by somebody, if not Senator Johnson, someone else.
So in light of all the sensitivity surrounding it, how do Republican and Democratic senators tiptoe around this now in the weeks and perhaps months to come?
I think exactly right.
They're going to leave it alone for a while. There's no question.
They have a lot of backroom conversations and no front room conversations about it.
All right. Thank you. I want you to stay right there because we've got a lot more to come. Next, our top... So is what you just listened to poetry, spirituality, racism, all three? We turn to our top story panel once more. Republican consultant Reverend Joe Watkins, liberal Air America radio host Rachel Maddow, Republican strategist and Congress of Racial Equality spokesman Niger Innis. Welcome back.
Thank you.
How do you think the average white person would react to what Autumn's saying there? Is it racist, Rachel?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we call it racist. I think she's an 8-year-old poet, and that's kind of impressive on its own front. If we need to look at the idea that white racism has a mirror in black racism, and in order to find it, we have to go to an 8-year-old girl who's a poet, I have a sense that we're not really talking about equal and opposite actions on both sides.
A lot of folks in our audience would say you don't have to equate it to an 8-year-old because there are a lot of examples of racism directed from blacks to white. And this is just an example of what they perceive as is
what she's
a
doing
racist kid.
What she's doing is ostentatiously and directly and deliberately confrontational. She's trying to make people uncomfortable about race. She's doing that as a poet. She's 8 years old. She's very effective at it.
I think this kind of behavior is learned. I mean, she hasn't had enough life experiences at the age of 8 to really be able to talk about all the stuff that she's talking about. She's a very bright girl, obviously, very articulate, very creative girl.
Right.
But
do you think she's learned not to like white people a whole lot?
Well,
is that what you heard?
Well, I think so. I think it's not to not like white people, but I think that her line of thinking comes from her father.
All right, let's go on to some emails from last night that I want you all to touch upon. This one came from Jennifer in New York City. Why do the media always bring up the KKK when discussing racism? What about showing Nation of Islam meetings or the Black Panthers? Blacks are just as racist as whites. Can you equate the Black Panthers to the KKK? Can you equate the Nation of Islam to KKK?
I think those comparisons are dangerous, but I think there's no question if Autumn Ashante's name was Autumn Duke instead of Autumn Ashante, and she said to all the black kids in the audience, we want you all to sit down while I give you a poem on how your black ancestors in Africa sold you to white slave traders, I think we would have no question that it was racism. I actually think this poor little girl, Autumn, is a victim of child abuse by her father. I agree with Joe. She's a victim of child. She's a cute, very bright, articulate young little girl, but quite frankly, she's more of a danger in this radical chic that's kind of been around, this extreme radical chic that's been around the black community since the 60s, is actually more oppressive to blacks in this sense. We have made a lot of progress in this country in terms of race relations, so much so that you've got people from all around the world, all different colors, including blacks, that are desperately trying to get in to maximize that new opportunity, and she is putting blacks in a position, well, not she, her father, is through her, is admiring them in the past, marring them in essentially always seeing ourselves as victims. The glass half empty as opposed to half full.
Let's move on to another email. This one from Kathleen in Smyrna, Georgia. I watched both nights about your special. I found it to be extremely interesting. I do, however, feel that focusing more than one night on racism, however, further justifies for blacks to feel that the world is against them. There are a lot of people who feel that way, that this racism thing is hyped and promotes a culture of victimhood.
Well, you know, what I said last night, I still believe in my heart, which is to say that we do have problems in this country. There's no doubt. This is the greatest country in the world, but we have problems here. But
address that specifically about promoting victimhood.
Well,
I mean, even Bill Cosby ticked a lot of people off in the black community.
I love what Bill Cosby is doing. I love what I think Bill Cosby's got it right. The whole idea is to understand our history, to know the history of America, to know its warts as well as the wonderful things that have happened here, and to not make the same mistakes going forward, and then to move forward. This is the 21st century. We have an opportunity to continue to bring forth the change by the way we treat other people.
Is there too much a culture of victimhood?
No, and talking about the fact that there is racism does not create racism. It's not the same thing. It's acknowledging something that's here. And if we pretend that it's not here by not talking about it, then something happens like the response to Hurricane Katrina or the killing of Sean Bell, or something happens that everybody acknowledges is absolutely inflected by the history of racism and race relations in this country.
Sean Bell is the case of a young man who was killed in New York by police officers, and there's been no indication.
Some of them were black. Come on,
but you cannot say that the wait. You cannot say that the response to the killing of Sean Bell is not inflected by race in America. There was not an uprising in Queens where all of Queens marched about it. It was a response of the black community in New York to that shooting because of the history of police relations with the black community. That's real.
I think when we talk about race in the country, we look at it through the microscope, and we look at it through these one isolated incidents, and we blow a lot out of proportion. I think it's important for us to really look at the macro picture in terms of race relations and look at where we are today versus where we've come. I just came away from seeing Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. Hello, that wouldn't have existed in 1956.
All right, well, we're going to continue to look a lot at this issue in the days to come. Reverend Joe Watkins, Rachel Maddow, Niger Innes, thank you.
Thank you.